Hi, I'm Van Souders, founder at Plasmid. I am so happy to introduce you to 7 past participants in the Serious Game Showcase and Challenge. These panelists have decades of experience creating medical games and simulations. Their passion and desire have fueled the creation of immersive applications that help improve the lives of patients and users around the world. They are innovators in the truest sense of the word. Enjoy as they share their thoughts on the use of games for medical applications and the future of this exciting field.
Hello, I'm Doug Watley. I'm the CEO of Breakaway Games. We've been around for almost 23 years now, doing everything from entertainment games, military simulations, but over the past decade or 15 years, more and more our games have moved into the medical area, particularly in medical training. And so most of what we do these days is create training games for doctors and nurses. Everything from those that are just learning it and that are in school to learn those skills, up to allowing them to practice the things they already know and make sure they are fresh on the techniques they need to use. And then moving into the areas of assessment and really getting into where we can use games to evaluate performance and in some ways allow people to improve their performance in their jobs.
Hello, my name is Mitch Rubel, and I'm part of Design Interactive's Biosignature Analytics division.
Hi, I'm Erin Reynolds, and I am the founder and creative director of a video game studio called Flying Mollusk. I've been working in the video game industry for a little over 15 years, and I founded Flying Mollusk several years ago to focus on making what I call edgy games for good. So games that are just as entertaining and exciting and immersive as any traditional game out there in the market. But in addition to that, they give back to the player in some way, shape, or form. We're most well known for a game called Nevermind, which is a biofeedback enhanced adventure thriller game and that uses everyday consumer available sensors like an Apple Watch or even a webcam. And if it detects potential anxiety or stress or fear in the player while they're playing the game becomes more intense. And if the player is able to calm down, then the game becomes easier and more forgiving. So it's sort of like a stress management tool disguised as a video game.
Hi, I'm Van Souders, the founder of Plasmid, where we create treadmill-based digital therapeutics for use during cardiac rehabilitation and fitness.
Hi, my name's Carolyn Mee, and I'm the founder and CEO of Sound Scouts.
And I'm Joao Moreno, and I am the head of technology.
Sound Scouts is a hearing screening business. The application runs on mobile devices. You simply download the app from the App Store or Google Play, and it's designed to make testing easy and accessible. The hearing screening test is embedded in a game, so players, mostly children, are engaged in the activity, and the data we collect is high value, and we get good quality results from the test.
I'm Thomas Talbot. I'm a retired Army physician, and I created the Tri-Service Medical Simulation R&D program at Fort Detrick while I was on active duty. I've been building medical simulations and games for 23 years. I currently work at the MedVR laboratory at the USC Institute for Creative Technologies and Army Futures Command UARC. We've been making compelling mixed reality simulations and virtual patient conversation games for some time there.
Hello. My name is Randy Brown, and I'm in the Virtual Heroes division of Applied Research Associates. My background is in computer science and computer graphics, and I've been working in the virtual simulation and training industry for over 20 years.
Hello, I'm Craig Porter, the National Project Manager for the Veterans Health Administration Employee Education System. I work in the development of game-based learning training modules for the e-learning division. Prior to this, I worked at U.S. Army Games for Training program at PEO Stride. I'm a retired Army officer where I spent the last 7 years as an FA-57 Simulations Operations Officer.
Working in games in the medical space is really fulfilling. Entertainment games are fun, and a lot of people get into the games business because they just sort of enjoy that creative aspect of putting things out there and having people experience what you've created. But after a while, that can start to feel a little hollow. But when you're putting that creativity into something that actually literally saves lives, that can be very fulfilling. We get to work with medical professionals to identify particularly thorny issues, and with that they can then put that knowledge into a simulation or a game and allow other people to grapple with those issues that they need to be prepared for so that they can save a life when the time comes. That's all very rewarding. We get to work where we're trying to often replicate reality, whether that's the reality of a patient or a situation or a medical condition. And that can be really challenging in ways that entertainment games aren't. In the past, I did quite a few years where we created football games. And it was a very fun challenge to try to replicate NFL football in a game. But ultimately, it didn't matter so much if we got it right or wrong, just so that the game players enjoyed it when they were then playing that simulation of football. But that's not true when you're creating a game for the medical space. Whether you've created a game that exposes a patient to a condition that they're probably dealing with or want to learn about, it's very important to create the reality of that situation for them. And on the other side, if you're creating places where doctors and nurses can practice treating a patient, dealing with a crisis, then you want that to be as realistic a challenge so you can prepare them for that. One of the biggest values that gaming brings is exposing people to situations that it's very, very expensive or very, very difficult to expose them to, except for the real world situation. That's a big part of the reason why the military has really gravitated towards games for training, and healthcare is the same way. You don't want doctors, nurses, or soldiers having their first experience of a deadly situation to be with real lives on the line there. You want them to be prepared because they've experienced this situation before, and that situation that they experienced in the game is as close to reality as possible. So it really is a great learning experience. We as a team learn a lot about physiology and medicine and everything else that is necessary to recreate that situation so that a doctor can actually experience it.
Games in the medical space. So to me, this is such a great opportunity to be able to make games for the medical space. The whole reason I chose my background of biomedical engineering was because I really wanted to be in a field where I felt like I could have a direct impact and change someone's life. I really wanted to be able to help people, and I really enjoyed that science and engineering and math background. And so when I found biomedical engineering, it was perfect. Combine that with the fact that I am definitely an avid gamer. I love playing video games. I love, playing on my computer or consoles. Being able to make games that help people was such an amazing opportunity. So when I first started Design Interactive 3 years ago, I was actually hired to help start off with one of our efforts we submitted to the Serious Game Showcase and Challenge, which was ADAPT-NP. It's a really long acronym. It stands for the Auto Diagnostic Adaptive Precision Trainer for Myoelectric Prosthesis Users. Essentially, it's this game we've developed to help upper limb amputees be able to train their residual limb muscle sites in preparation for receiving a myoelectric prosthetic arm. So a lot of times they end up getting these devices. They have an amputation, they go through the surgery, they go through recovery and fitting, and they get their device, and it's heavy and it's difficult to use at first because it uses EMG sensors to detect your residual muscle activity to help control your hand, your terminal device. And training is very boring, and it's unengaging, and it's usually like a lot of at-home physical therapy, or if you're lucky, you get to go work with your clinician only on site of playing these quote unquote video games, which are really just like move an object on a screen. It's pretty basic, pretty simplistic, and not very fun. And so what ends up happening is they aren't trained, they don't prepare for it, and they don't end up using these expensive devices. And so the DI recognizes need for a training platform to help bridge that gap between an amputation and receiving that terminal, that limb, that new limb. And so we made this series of games, these dinosaur-themed games, really trying to appeal to those, the military population that, that's largely undergoing the amputations. And we had these kind of 4 different dinosaur-themed games. We're trying to keep them engaged while they're training through learning how to use individual muscle sites, learning how to control the strength of each of those muscle sites. So not only just activating them, but how much are they activating them? So that way they don't just fully burn out by activating muscles so strong and flexing as hard as they can, or using them so little that they're not seeing any activity and they get discouraged. And then finally, the coolest game I thought we had of that one was one where we're actually able to have them kind of like pick up objects. So they move their limb across, back and forth. They have to control cursor using accelerometers in the device to move over an object, activate a muscle site to pick up the object, move it across the screen, activate their other muscle site to release it. So being able to make a game like that for people that can make an active difference in their lives and be able to help them was so fascinating. Not only that, the second game I got to be a part of, Glue Rescue, which we also submitted the Serious Game Showcase and Challenge, was a game we made also to help upper limb individuals, primarily those undergoing cerebral palsy, though, so kids. And being able to kind of make this game from scratch. So I came in, we made this game completely from scratch, these kids. And just being able to watch them interact with it and play with it was such a rewarding opportunity. My favorite time, I still remember and still tell stories of to this day, is when we had kind of our game and we've done a bunch of iterations on it. We're able to make it. So we had these cool slime, gooish looking characters on screen to rescue them from this pit of goo they got stuck in. So they have to using the Microsoft Kinect, they have to move their hand over the object on the screen and hold it there, which for most people is fairly easy, but for people with cerebral palsy, you have a lot of this muscle weakness or muscle contractures, and so being able to move your affected limb and hold it there can be quite a challenge. So watching the kids come out and play it and get really competitive is exciting. And my favorite part was we had this young girl come in. She came in with one of the faculty, and she was kind of straight faced, coming in, probably wasn't sure what to expect, just that she's going to play a video game. But then when she started playing it, this slow smile creeped across her face, and right then and there, I knew we had such a great system developed, because the point of these games is twofold. We want to be able to make something that does help people, that lets them train themselves, become better, to improve their performance, become a better person, become better and be able to help improve themselves so that they can feel more confident, they can be strengthened to do the things they want, so they can be more independent and do the things they want and should be able to do. But it's also making sure they can have a fun time doing it and trying to find that perfect balance of something that is fun and engaging, but also optimized to improve their performance. It can be difficult, but it's such a fascinating field to be in. And just being able to be a part of it is so rewarding, and it really is amazing to be a part of this field.
So making games for use in the medical space, to me, means finding a way to take this incredible power that games have to immerse players, to add context to situations, to even virtually place people in the shoes of another person or thing or situation in a way that's engaging and incites curiosity and insight. Taking all of that and then, applying it to any number of medical uses that could use this level of engagement and immersion and a friendly approach to maybe topics that are uncomfortable or are a little unapproachable, maybe motivating players to take actions that without sort of a fun context, maybe seems a little bit off-putting. I know this is very abstract, but I think there's so many applications for games and in the medical space that, there's just so many ways it can be used that at a high level, I think this is the types of marriage of two different disciplines that can have such great results. So for example, in Nevermind, even though Nevermind as it's currently available, it's really more of a wellness game. It's not, as it's currently available, intended for clinical uses or medical uses in a formal sense right now, although we have ambitions to bring it to that space eventually. We take consumer level biofeedback, so heart rate monitors, like a Garmin cardio chest strap, things people use for fitness. And we take that data and put it in the context of a game to teach, again, stress management and mindfulness techniques that, on paper may seem a little dry or maybe a little too weird for some people, but in a video game, it's just part of the gameplay experience. It gives us this context that's a little bit more approachable for some folks, and I think, again, making games for the medical space, that it can apply to all sorts of applications across the board.
I think for myself and the team at Plasmid, the experiences that we create, we really look at them as a way to improve the lives of people who are going through either recovery or treatment. It's a chance to take what we've learned during the years creating serious games, simulations, and entertainment products, and really put it out there as a force for good.
Well, we can definitely say things that you may expect, such as we want to make a difference in the world through the use of creative solutions and digital skills combined with scientific breakthroughs. But I also want to say that for me particularly, and I'm sure for Colin as well, it has been an opportunity to connect with other like-minded people and organizations that understand how much of the digital world takes place in the future of the medical space. And of course, we've seen that this year with telehealth, and SoundScales represents that step, that it's not only digital, but it's also trying to make things engaging and take a step forward in implementing more than just the science of something, but making it, it's games for change. So it's fun, it's engaging, and it's gathering a type of data that wouldn't be possible in normal applications.
I think the potential for serious games is so great, and we're really just at the tip of the iceberg when it comes to applying the capabilities. And I think for us, we're particularly excited to be at the forefront of that. SoundScouts is a clinically validated medical device, and I know from a gaming perspective that we're one of the few companies in the world who are utilizing gaming technology in this way. So, it means a lot to us to be, in many cases, breaking new ground and really sort of exploring and capturing and documenting the full potential of games.
Games are about experiential learning. They are a safe space to try things without serious consequences. They allow learners to develop creative solutions and find out what works through cause and effect. It's part of learning that brings together all that book and lab knowledge and replicates it with real-world challenges. Medical games, for me, I'd say it's an emerging capability to assess and achieve a high degree of competency. And it's really useful in areas where these skills cannot be practiced routinely or without risk to people.
So in talking about games and creating games in the medical space, we've been creating virtual training content for many years, many different customers, from commercial customers to the DoD. And one thing that I think is particularly valuable when we're making games in the medical space is that these are games that make a difference. As you'd say, serious games. Are you going to make a difference in somebody's life with this game? And not just from an entertainment standpoint, but is there an educational element? Is there something that you can do with this game that you couldn't do with standard pencil and paper, or even online, HTML-based, text-based, multiple choice? questions or other type of training content. The real question comes down to, what is it about virtual training content that works so well in the medical training space? And I'm not going to talk about a specific game. I'll just cover a few that we've developed over the last 15 years or so. Things that really seem to provide a lot of value in the medical training space are training scenarios, one, that have very specific procedures that may be difficult to follow or may have some additional variability. And the other part is that there could be a time pressure. And one of the great things, kind of a nice game mechanic, is that you can apply time pressure to learners in a virtual space and really put them under the gun, really put some pressure on them to complete a certain task in a certain amount of time.
We have found that GBL works best when the medical training requirements are related to clinical procedures and rehearsal of those procedures. From interviewing a virtual patient in order to diagnose and treat PTSD, to physically observing an avatar showing the signs and symptoms of a stroke, which are both some of the actual GBL products we have in our library right now. Motivation like scoring and awards, so that learners have the desire to absorb the training objectives. This helps learners store the information in their long-term memory for active retention and adds an element of fun.
A lot of what we do was inspired by the entertainment games that we originally did. We had lots and lots of users that played games and then came to us and said, if you could do this for us in our area of need, that would be so useful. So we didn't have to be that smart to figure out that, people needed this. The users themselves came to us and pointed out ways that games could be used. That really allows us to hone in on just what they need to do, because they're so cognizant of just how the tool can be used for their problem.
For our first, we have two games. We went to the Serious Games Showcase and Challenge. Adapt MP, which was the myoelectric pre-prosthetic training game platform, and then Gloob Rescue, which was a game platform for children with cerebral palsy, where they have to use the Microsoft Kinect to control cursor on screen and rescue objects. For Adapt MP, we made a dinosaur themed game. And we actually made some more updates since, I'll go over here. But what inspired the game was a need to fill a field of trying to get people to actually practice using their muscle sites, actively train and prepare themselves when they get their device, they get a hold of it, and they feel comfortable using it. They can get their device, get their new prosthetic arm, put it on, go out and say, I can control this. I'm in control. I've got this. And not just, this is too hard, I'm not ready, and then throw it away and never use it, because by taking advantage of it, they're able to go back out and perform the more activities of daily living that they should be able to perform, they want to do. So testing with a local center in Orlando, the Conductive Education Center of Orlando, SECO, and we got to work with them. They were part of our team. We got to work with them, and we got to be able to demonstrate our game to the kids there. And watching their reactions to it, like the dart game, they kind of played and it was okay. But watching them really play this one they were so excited. They were trying to go back and they wanted to play more. They wanted to, maybe they didn't get all of them the first time, so they wanted to go back and train and do it again, or they wanted to do it faster. They wanted to compete with each other. And it was so rewarding to see them get so invested in this game, because again, it's about balancing, making an enjoyable game with one that will actually benefit them and improve their long-term health and performance.
So Nevermind was inspired by a few different things. It started as my master's thesis at the University of Southern California. And for our thesis year in the Interactive Media and Games program, which is what I was studying, you get a whole year to work on a game project that's up to you. So there are a few things that I wanted to bring into that game project. I know I had a year to try the most ambitious idea that I could think of, so I really want to go for these areas I was interested in, and didn't have a chance to explore as much prior to then. So one of those places is biofeedback. I think at that time, there wasn't a lot being done with biofeedback in games. I had worked with it just a very little bit a couple of years before. The technology wasn't quite there yet. So when it came time for my thesis, I wanted to explore a little further, see if the technology had progressed enough to integrate, heart rate signals into a video game. And then I also, of course, wanted to make a game that was fun and beneficial to the player. That's been my passion for a long time. And so obviously that was a core piece to it. And then I also always wanted to work on a horror game. I love the horror genre and the horror aesthetic. And I hadn't had a chance to make a horror game up until that point. I used it as an opportunity to hopefully bring awareness and destigmatize PTSD and psychological trauma as well.
I'm a lifelong runner. I've been a distance runner for almost as long as I can remember. And I always found that running was a great way for me to relax, to clear my mind, and to recenter myself. And what we wanted to do was take the feeling of having a long distance run in an outdoor environment and allow people to engage with that experience while they were going through rehabilitation, but also do it in a way that really brought narrative and story into the experience as well. So essentially somebody that was going through rehabilitation could step onto a treadmill and really enter an adventure, a world where hopefully they thought anything could happen, where there was a backstory with characters and with the environment itself. And that hopefully the intent was that they would get lost in that environment, and that it would make it easier to come back, go through the rehabilitation, and mixing that with patient information as well and education. So hopefully the net benefit was that it would improve their time spent there.
A number of things inspired the development of the game, but I think one of the key things was looking at the number of children in Australia where we're based who didn't have access to a cost-effective hearing check. So in Australia, we have newborn hearing screening, but after birth, there was no follow-up testing. And this was a real issue because just many hundreds, or if not thousands of children were starting school with hearing issues that we didn't basically have a way of detecting. So I think the aim, we wanted to deliver something that would enable a child in a remote or regional area to have their hearing checked and assessed. I think, in many parts of the country, it can be a 2-hour, 3-hour drive to an audiologist, and you don't want to be making that journey if, for example, the child's hearing is actually fine and maybe it's an attention issue that's causing the problem.
Standard Patient was inspired by the dynamics of interpersonal communications, where the real-world challenges happens for physicians and other people in the medical field. We wanted to simulate realistic encounters with patients, and wanted something else that could also be used non-medically for leadership or interrogation or negotiation-based training, where you can exercise your skills. Standard Patient itself was designed to really give you those skills you really need when you're together with your patient, but in a very naturalistic way.
The way that people use our games mostly is they're put into a situation where they have to triage the situation, go through with a patient, identifying conditions or identify the vital signs and what it tells them about a situation. All of those are created to put someone in a real world situation. The ways that these games are used is often replicating reality. We've created train wrecks and car accidents and bombings at a mall and bombings in a military situation. We've created airplane accidents, all types of situations. And we've also created all types of patients, every type of trauma that could show up in an emergency room, or ways that a patient could have a bad incident while they're in the hospital. And we've created all of those so that the users of the games can actually experience these situations in a non-life-threatening situation. We want to put them in there so that they have to deal with all these patients while at the same time they're being distracted by family members, by phone calls, by other people trying to do their jobs, all types of situations that can make you make a mistake. And we want them to be able to handle it in the game so that in real life, it's very easy for them to handle it.
So right now we have these two different games. We have Adapt MP, which is our upper limb amputee myoelectric pre-prosthetic training system with a cool dinosaur theme and now a new temple theme put on it as well. And we have Glue Rescue, which is this kind of goo character, saving them with the Microsoft Kinect, tracking your hand in space, and saving them from a slime pit for kids with cerebral palsy that are working on their overall range of motion and muscle strengthening. So right now we're in the phase where we're working towards putting this out there on the market. So Adapt MP is being used right now with the amputee. We're about to start an amputee study where we'll have amputees use the system in comparative physical therapy. Glue Rescue has been used already with kids with cerebral palsy. We've partnered with the Connective Education Center of Orlando and actually left them a copy of this game. So they have been able to use it with their kids on set over there. So our ultimate goal of these games is actually to kind of merge them together into one cohesive platform. So our whole idea is to be able to have it so we can have like this one platform people can access where they can work with their therapist or a clinician or even just access it themselves and be able to go and download these various games. They'll benefit them, but them still be games at the same time. And we want to make sure it's targeting a wide audience. We want to be able to put it on like the PC, mobile phones, like Android and iOS, but then also like game stations like Nintendo Switch or PlayStation or Xbox. We want to be able to have it so there's this platform of rehabilitation-focused games out there that individuals can go and access, use, and then if possible, and then as well, if possible, pair it with like some sort of web platform for therapists or clinicians, if there's ones in the loop, so that they can actually see the performance measurements going on in the background while the kids or the users are playing this and still playing a game. And they're able to kind of that way work on improving their strengthening, work on the range of motion, maybe heal up after an injury or help train before they get a new prosthetic device, and be able to have this to be able to help them and play this kind of unique, fun game. We want to be able to make it too so that these games we make are games that people can play not just with themselves, but maybe they compete with somebody all the way across the country. Maybe there's like we want to be able to have this leaderboard out there where they can like rank themselves against other people or play head-to-head matchups or even play with their own family and friends who've come over, because the point of gaming isn't just me playing with myself, doing physical therapy. Yay, I'm having fun and I'm training. A lot of gaming is about community. It's about bringing people together in a fun, enjoyable way. And so we want to be able to make sure that when we develop this platform of games, we develop this suite of games, that it's targeting this larger audience of various people with injuries, but also is still appealing to the family and friends who come over so that people will want to play this.
So our vision for Nevermind was always for players to use it, to play it like just again, a traditional game, a normal game. You download it from Steam, you download it from Xbox, and you play it just like you would any other game. But if you play it with the one of the sensors that we support, and there's a few that we support, then you get this additional biofeedback component that is listening to the player as they're playing the game. So the game being a thriller, a horror game, puts the player in a lot of very intense situations. And if the player lets their feelings of anxiety, of stress, of fear get the better of them, the game will escalate in intensity, the environment will change and adapt around them. So for example, there's one part in one level where if the player's in this kitchen, this really creepy kitchen, and as the player starts to feel any fear or stress, the kitchen will start to flood with milk. And it makes sense in the context of the story of the game. And the longer the player stays stressed or anxious, the more the milk will flood and rise. And if the player is able to take a deep breath and calm down, then, and the game picks up on that, release of anxiety, the milk will start to subside and drain. But if the player is unable to calm down, the milk will actually flood and drown the player character, which is our way of saying, okay, this is really intense for the player right now. We're going to take them out of that room, put them in a calmer spot. And then once they've had a chance to regroup and feel like they're ready to approach it again, they can go back into the kitchen and try to progress through it again. And we see this as almost like a metaphor for what happens in real life, right? Where, you start to get scared or stressed or anxious about something. You lose your car keys and you're running late to this important meeting. And the more stressed and anxious you get about it, the harder it is to think clearly, right? And you're tearing up the room. You can't find your car keys anywhere. Whereas if you just take a deep breath, calm down, and kind of let that intensity sort of subside a little bit, you might remember that, oh, right, I put my keys, in the fridge for some reason, and so that's what we're trying to give players, the opportunity to put themselves in these fictional intense scenarios and learning what works best for them for stress management. And that way it becomes almost a habit as they're playing through the game, as they go through intense situation after intense situation. And they can then take those skills, take that practice, and apply it to everyday situations.
So currently the game is in use at Jefferson University Hospital's Cardiac Rehabilitation Department in Philadelphia. So it's serving patients today. And we see it being used, hopefully, spreading out and from there and being used across the country in cardiac rehabilitation. But ideally beyond that, hopefully we get into pulmonary rehabilitation as well, which is most of the therapy centers that do cardiac rehabilitation will also do pulmonary. But even looking at moving that experience into areas such as, activity of daily living rehabilitation, just fitness, and more.
So Sound Scouts is now being used in over 1,200, 1,300 schools, and it's being used to test tens of thousands of children, the hearing of tens of thousands of children. And we've had great feedback from educators who absolutely love the application.
Our training is in active use around the country at various facilities. In the military, it's being used at Uniformed Services University, the School of Aerospace Medicine, and at West Point Military Academy. Some of the things that we've been doing is we've been using it to conduct quality medical interviews that are thorough and efficient. We've always also been using it for musculoskeletal examination and are studying that at USUS currently. We're experimenting with using it to train individuals to identify suicidal peers. We've done things where we try to do persuasion-based training to convince a hesitant person to vaccinate, for example.
As to how we can do that. But there's other elements where you just need some level of visual fidelity. You need to familiarize the student with what it may look like in the real world. And I think doing this in a virtual environment is something that's also very valuable. We have the ability to create amazingly high quality visuals nowadays, and we can help the learner get past potentially the shock value of, say, a burn care patient or of a patient that's hemorrhaging by creating a blood pool that's expanding around the patient in real time, where the patient may be yelling at you to hurry up and complete the task a little more quickly because they're not appreciating the pace that you're using to get it done.
When the user makes the correct decision, they prevent a medical code emergency. If the learner makes incorrect decision, the patient condition worsens. The target audience for this training module is medical surgical nurses, registered respiratory therapists, and registered nurses. It is accredited by the American Nurses Credentialing Center, or ANCC, and is currently available on the Apple App Store if you did a search for VHA MedSearch. This branching is the main requirement that makes GBL the best option for these training objectives. When the user makes the correct decision, they prevent a medical code emergency.
Games in the medical space have in many ways evolved as technology has gotten better. The situations look more realistic, seem more realistic, they're more immersive. Whether that's because it's moved into virtual reality or augmented reality, or because the quality of the graphics hardware has gotten better. It's also spread more widely as phones and tablets have gotten more capable. It's easier for us to deploy the situations in many ways that people can easily get to them, where they need them, when they need them, or when they have time to do some training. So what we were doing 15 years ago was on high-end machines, it was very narrowly focused in the research area to identify if these games could actually be used to train doctors and nurses, whether these games could be used to assess these doctors and nurses. And all of that's been proven now. We've moved beyond the research phase of using games in the healthcare space. And now we're trying to figure out what's the best way to deploy them, what's the best way to actually get them into users' hands so we can begin to take advantage of the immersion that allows them to really learn and experience and be prepared for situations.
It's fascinating to see how games have evolved over time. And it's fascinating to see how games are continuing to evolve and using these new control schemas and mechanisms. I mean, over the past decade, we've seen the Kinect. The Kinect came in, it was this interesting thing, and then it went away. But all of a sudden it came back again because there's a need for it. People were using it. We actually, Design Interactive, used it for one of our games as a control. Seeing how the games have evolved is a really good indication of seeing how medical games have evolved as well. People don't necessarily think of video games with rehab. It's something that I feel like has really come into play, I mean, over the past decade, but you see it a lot kind of starting with Nintendo, when they kind of brought in the original Wii, and they had like the motion controlled joysticks, and you saw that start off as this kind of fun niche thing targeted towards families, but then you saw that grow, and it started being targeted towards senior centers and kids with injuries. They're able to go and play these games and target it. You saw things like the Wii balance board being used for gait analysis studies, for rather just kind of basic balance for individuals with gait. And some of to see these games take advantage of newer systems and platforms, people are getting an idea now of there's more to video games than just sitting at a computer and typing things in or using a controller, because no one thinks of those as being therapeutic. Those are fun, they're enjoyable, great way to pass time, but they're not therapeutic and beneficial. So watching how even just people's attitudes have changed has been really interesting when it comes to video games. It's gone from being this thing that people were maybe embarrassed about or only kids do to something that's everyone's playing nowadays, from young to old. Everyone's playing video games, and seeing that targeted now and become mimicking more real life, that's really where we see comments. And so when all of a sudden virtual reality and augmented reality have come in, that's opened up a whole new world. People can now do these things at home rather than having to go to a clinic or go to a center. And
in the last decade or so, I think there has been a really encouraging embracing of those types of games across industries, the game industry, the medical community. It seems like it wasn't that long ago where, you mentioned to someone video games, people just think of, Mario or something like, Mario's great, but, like kind of just the toy aspect of the video game. Whereas now they're actually being taken seriously as this wonderful, tool that can be used. And even though we're starting to see more and more of that now, I think we are just scratching the surface. I think there's so much potential out there that we have yet to really fully realize. And to me, that's exciting because I think the sky's the limit.
There's been a strong push toward the use of or the creation of validated digital therapeutics, sort of these types of experiences growing up, going through clinical trials, and in some cases, even getting approved by the FDA. And I think we'll see more of that. I think that we'll see them as standalone interventions. And I think that we'll eventually see immersive experiences in medical games work along pharmacologics as dual use therapies. And I think that, hopefully that we'll see synergistic effects between the two.
When you hide all the serious stuff behind a really fun game, or when a game is so popular that it's actually being served as a platform for something else, like Minecraft, you know how it...
my background was in content creation, Kawau's background was in game development, and our background wasn't in audiology or hearing. And so for us, we were actually having to, make a lot of discoveries about how the environment worked and how eventually we would be able to insert our product into that environment. And, I think when you're disruptive technology as well, that can be a challenge. And our first game that we ever built was a teeth cleaning game. And it was a lot of fun to try and motivate and demonstrate to children how to clean their teeth properly. So we've moved to hearing, and, who knows, we may explore eyes next. So.
Medical games are getting much better. In the past, much of it was about playing with novel technology and seeing if you could actually do it, or playing with the capabilities. I don't think that's the case anymore. I think right now we're in a phase where we're learning the best practices to make compelling experiences. We're also learning to measure performance, where we really couldn't do that well before, and allow us to replay to perfection. That's something really unique to them, and it's better than something you could do with a one-time high-stakes experience.
So, talking a little more about additional capabilities in medical training, I really think one of the key value adds is team coordination and communication. There's one program called Team Steps. There's other programs that we've been asked to implement some over the years. I really think with gaming technology and immersive content like this, having the ability for multiplayer and true collaboration, being able to collaborate around a virtual patient, maybe even role play, have an individual who can role play as the virtual patient, I think it really helps the believability of role players in a team-based scenario. I've seen many times over the years people being handed a sheet of paper and saying, you're a role, this is your role today, here's somebody else's role, okay, go. Now you're looking at your friend and you're like, okay, hi, Mrs. Johnson. And then your buddy says, hi, I'm Mrs. Johnson. I think it's a lot easier for people to suspend the disbelief and collaborate around a virtual patient when you have the ability to jump into a fully immersive team-based trainer. And at that point, you just need a sufficient level of interactivity with the environment, with the virtual avatar, being able to hang a blood bag or insert a central line or things like that. And then based on being able to perform those somewhat basic tasks, you could still have someone run this as a simulation lab where they could be driving the physiology instead of it being a real-time physiology engine. Maybe you have a system where you could be maybe dropping the blood oxygenation or increasing the heart rate or things like that. So much as an operator may do that in a live simulation lab, there's great capabilities to be able to do that in the multiplayer space. So team-based training, I think where you have an engaged instructor and you have the ability to bring trainings together at the same time, I think provides a lot of value. Again, a lot of organizations, I believe, are excited and are interested in getting team-based training scenarios developed so that they can provide them to their learners, but they don't recognize potentially the level of difficulty, although I think with everybody being in Zoom and virtual meetings today, it may be easier, but the difficulty in getting people scheduled, coordinated, and all into a session at the same time. So 2020 may completely change that barrier to entry, which would be phenomenal, because classically it's been much more difficult to get, especially in the DoD space, to get people scheduled for a specific time to say that's when you're going to go jump in world and we're going to have this training session. We've created a combat medic training, which is multiplayer. It's actually multiple patients, multiple players, real-time physiology. You jump in, you get your kit, you need to interact with the virtual patient, but there's a challenge in just, okay, well, how many guys or trainees are we going to get into this space at 6 p.m. on a Tuesday? And the answer may be, maybe it's only going to be 4. Where I'd really like to be able to be running, groups of, 6 or 8, multiple groups of 6 or 8 simultaneously through the environment. Nice thing is, with cloud-based technology nowadays, you can have these servers on standby in the cloud. As soon as anybody's ready to train, spin up an instance, jump into a multiplayer training session, run the session. It can be automatically recorded for the instructor to be able to review and provide feedback to the learners later. So I think there's a lot of exciting opportunities here with increasing improvements in bandwidth and connectivity, and the ability to deploy content like this in the cloud and deploy content to more public-facing interfaces like Google Play and the App Store, but still provide that to learners in the DoD space.
Well, for me, I've noticed that when it comes to GBL products, the federal government seems to take a little longer in modernization advancements compared to industry and academia. This sometimes limits us in what we can deliver. But I am excited in the advancements that we made over the last year. Since I arrived 4 years ago, due to IT and cybersecurity limitations, our original GBL products were delivered using Unity Web Player, which was phased out a couple years ago. We also have thousands of e-learning products that contain Adobe Flash, which is being phased out this year. Another challenge is that our default web browser is Internet Explorer 11, which has many limitations when it comes to modernized GBL products. But we have made great strides over the last year for all of these challenges. We are phasing out and replacing all of our Adobe Flash products. We now have Google Chrome web browser available and have converted all of our products to WebGL and have started our first VR game-based learning products called Delirium. That will allow clinicians to experience what a patient experiences during a delirious episode. They will gain that empathy and better understand how to treat these patients.
About sponsoring Serious Games Showcase and Challenge. Virtual Heroes has been sponsored for quite a while for Serious Games Showcase. I really think it's one of the premier opportunity for a lot of organizations to get the content that they've been developing out in front of every leader in the DoD space that's participating in the vIITSEC conference. Starting out, I think they were very, very generous in allowing Serious Games Showcase and Challenge to set these booths up out front as you would have to go into the show floor for the exhibition. And I really thought that drove a ton of traffic to these booths, really got a lot of exposure, and specifically with a lot of the groups like student groups that were presenting capabilities, gave them the ability to really get their content out in front of a lot of people from different organizations and international folks from all around the world that are coming to ITSEC also, where they normally would never get a chance to get that kind of exposure. And then over the years, I really think the Serious Games Showcase and Challenge folks have done a great job in improving the amount of signage that's getting put out, driving people to the booths, having people fill out the cards, having folks vote on their favorites in all these different categories. I think has really driven a lot of thought leaders and decision makers into the showcase area. And so regardless of where it is on the show floor nowadays, I think most everybody that's been to ITSEC, by the time they've been to ITSEC 1 year, They know about the showcase. They know, okay, I'm going to try to look at as many booths as I can, while I'm at the conference, but I'm definitely going to at least make a pass through this area of just, massive creativity. I know that the number of submissions every year just continues to grow. The quality of the content has just been advancing by leaps and bounds. I think there's been amazing things that you see in the showcase, even 10 or 15 years ago for the time. But the capabilities of the platforms, and now being able to move into virtual reality demonstrations, augmented reality demonstrations, integrated hardware capabilities, part test trainers in the medical space. I think there's a lot of really interesting content that people get an opportunity to be exposed to. How's it benefited Virtual Heroes? Well, we've submitted to the Serious Game Showcase in the past. We've won, we come in second or lost some other times too. But I think it's really benefited in connectivity with the community of universities and companies, and even in customers that are interested in pushing the state of the art in virtual training and simulation. You see a lot of companies that consistently, year after year, are really leaning forward, are really working to come up with an approach or a solution for a customer that can then get funded and then demonstrate that capability at the showcase. There's a lot of hard problems to solve. There's a lot of different ways to crack this egg, and I really think that there's even more capability in the future to pull these things together. When you start pulling in things like biometrics that we've seen over the years, that's exciting. Even when you're going into VR systems nowadays with additional elements like eye tracking, or even just gait or movement. There's data out nowadays that within 5 minutes of someone being in a VR kit, you can recognize who that individual is just from their movements. So those types of tracking capabilities and being able to provide, a very, very high fidelity feedback to the learner, I think is going to improve our ability to make this learning content variable, make it replayable, make it constantly challenging, with using machine learning algorithms and AI to be able to advance the learner through the material by recognizing various capabilities that they've already achieved, and maybe not boring them with having to go through some of the rote learning steps. Maybe we can leapfrog students through to much more advanced capabilities. So I think there's just a great history of capabilities that have been demonstrated to date. I think every year these things move forward, even connectivity to physical mannequins, or like I said, part test trainer, hardware, specific devices for input to simulate things like maybe robotic surgery. There's tons of capabilities there that we can continue to push the envelope with. And for me, the benefit has been, it's great at the end of the competition to be able to see the teams get up there who are getting the awards and getting the recognition, and realizing that this really may open the door to them pursuing a career in creating virtual training content like this in the future. Because for me, applying this incredibly rich technology to solve serious problems in the medical training space, and continuing to look at ways to push the envelope to try to solve a hard problem in somebody's medical training needs is just something that I've really enjoyed doing over the years. And so thank you for your time, and I hope you enjoyed this session.